Hi, DevOps Stage. My name is Leonid. I am from SQL, and today we will talk about the hybrid infrastructure and how Azure can help us maintain this infrastructure. So, few words about myself. My name is Leonid Chetverikov. I'm working in SQL as DevOps expert. It's about myself. I was starting in 15 years ago, but let me notice that first of all, I was a developer. I was an ordinary Java developer, then passed several certifications, switched to DevOps, and then my career is growing up. I already had such certification as Microsoft, Linux Foundation, Kubernetes. So stop it. Let's continue with our theme. So what we will talk about? First of all, we will talk about the hybrid infrastructure. What does it mean? How we can know that this infrastructure is hybrid. Then we will talk about the problems with the hybrid infrastructure. To tell the truth, it will be a lot of different problems and a lot of different troubles that we will need to fix while we are implementing this infrastructure. Then we will switch to Azure, and so wonderful solution as an Azure Arc. I will describe what Azure Arc can do and how we can implement Azure Arc inside your environments. Okay, let's talk about the hybrid infrastructure. Let me read what the agent think about it. So, a hybrid cloud is a cloud computing environment that uses a mix of on-premises, private cloud, and third-party public cloud services with orchestration between these platforms. What does it mean? By default, each company has its own infrastructure. It can be switches, routers, different kind of the services, maybe some kind of the accounting services, etc. But when they decided to move inside the cloud, just create some kind of the backup, create some kind of the immutability inside the infrastructure, create some kind of, I don't know, maybe for example, different storage services, etc. They want to divide the infrastructure from local one to on-premises. That means that this infrastructure will be a hybrid. So let's continue from the tech agent, what they're thinking about. By default, this typically involves a connection from an on-premise data center to a public cloud. This connection can also involve other private assets, including edge devices or other clouds. What it means? So inside the hybrid infrastructure, it can be different clouds that can be united inside the one big infrastructure. And this infrastructure needs to be coordinated, managed, and maybe applied some kind of the policies from one place. Okay, we just talked about the hybrid infrastructure. And right now, let's talk about the small part of it, about the on-premises. On-premise infrastructure or private cloud is a cloud environment that is available for use only by one client. Rather than sharing a pool of resources with multiple customers, companies have complete access to all of the resources that a private cloud provides. Private clouds may be located within an organization's data center or located off-site and managed by a third party. Private clouds provide a more secure environment that can simplify compliance with stringent regulations. Private clouds simplify data governance and data locality issues and can deliver high SLA performance and efficiency. In few words, it means that inside the private infrastructure, you will be responsible for managing your own servers, managing your own network environments, managing the electricity, etc. But you can simply move this part of your responsibility inside the third-party providers and place them inside the data centers. But in this case, you will receive a high security, you will receive as for example, you'll receive a high delivery state for all of your resources that's stored near you, in your local data centers, or not far from your local environment. But what is the public cloud? Public cloud is a platform that uses the standard cloud computing model to make resources such as virtual machines, application, or storage available to users remotely. Let's talk about the cloud computing from Wiki. Cloud computing is the on-demand availability of computer system resources, especially data storages, cloud storage, and computing power without direct active management by the user. Large clouds often have functions distributed over multiple locations, each location being a data center. Cloud computing relies on sharing of resources to achieve coherence and typically use a pay-as-you-go model, which can help by reducing capital expenses, but may also lead to unexpected operational expenses for users. It was the cloud computing, by the way. Let's think that it's part of the CapEx OpEx modeling, but right now we are not talking about this. We are talking about the hybrid infrastructure. So public cloud services may be free or offered through a variety of subscriptions or on-demand pricing schemes, including a pay-per-usage model, pay-as-you-go, or maybe some kind of prepaid services where you're paying for the scope of the resources that you probably will need inside your environment. So, we already discussed about the hybrid infrastructure. We know that it consists of two pieces. One of them is private, second of them is a public cloud. And public cloud also consists of the public cloud modeling. Let's talk about the hybrid infrastructure more deeply. And first of all, let's talk about the problems that exist inside this hybrid infrastructure. First of them is complexity and visibility. Second, it's also well known for us. When something is really complex, we need to have the knowledge about all of this. You need to have some skills. So the second one problems, it's knowledge and skills. And it can be not enough in this hybrid infrastructure. Third one is security. Really, security can be a big gap inside hybrid infrastructure. Fourth, it's networking. You need to connect, you need to securely connect your public and private infrastructure. You need to know how it's connected, and you need to be aware that each data will be transferred from private to cloud and in back way. And fifth, is well known for every one of us, it's logging and monitoring. Let's deep dive inside each of these problems. So, as companies deploy more public cloud services and add private cloud capabilities, their IT environments are become much more complex from a management and security standpoint. Without taking a step to monitor usage of their services, they lose visibility of what's going on this environment. I want to citate some of the well-known IT persons. A hybrid environment naturally introduces more complexity. There are just so many more windows and doors to lock and more security maintenance, patching, etc. to perform, says Chris Kanarakus, Research Director for Dedicated and Hybrid Cloud Infrastructure Services at research firm IDC. We have seen so many high-profile media stories about data leaks caused by the human errors, such as misconfigured storage buckets on public clouds. The Cloud Security Alliance, CSA, And organizations that define the standards, certifications, and best practice to help ensure a secure cloud computing environment city misconfiguration and inadequate change control and limited cloud usage visibility has been among the top series of the cloud computing, and it was in 2020 years. So one more thing and one more cited. While choosing a hybrid cloud environment can offer an organization's choice and flexibility, it also means IT leaders need to reevaluate their security practice and consider how they may need to be adapted. It says Mandy Anderson, the CISO of Elastic. The saying, "You can't secure what you can't see," is especially true in hybrid cloud architecture. Mixing public and private clouds or infrastructure can increase complexity and heighten an organization's risks, making visibility and control paramount to securing distributed systems. And really, it's true. It's true about the knowledge and skills gaps. Yeah, it exists several ways how we can bypass this problem. One of the ways is offer internal and external trainings. This training need to include the security one, the role-based one, or some other way. It's to hire a professional that know everything, but it's really a hard way to find such persons. So, yeah, this problem is fixable. And let's continue. Let's continue with this. So, shifting security responsibility. One more citate. Let me read it. So, organizations attempt to extend private cloud security controls and technology stack to public clouds, which does not work in same cases. The shared responsibility model used by public cloud companies is something many enterprises still grapple with keeping top in mind. It's the cited from the Kanarakus. Kanarakus is a person from the Deloitte. He is responsible for the hybrid infrastructure and clouds. Colleagues, just to understand that security inside the private cloud and security inside the public cloud is some different. And this is one thing that we need to take in attention, that it exists shared responsibility cloud models, and we need to take in attention about the. And what is next? Next is a network security. Really challenges things. Network security is a key area where organizations continue to be challenged, as existing vendor tools supporting private cloud might not be suitable for the public clouds. Let's talk about the logging and monitoring. So, in hybrid cloud environment, log sources are spread across on-premises systems, public cloud, private cloud, and also vendor tools, some kind of the cloud-native services. What you need to do, you need to gather up all of these sources and pull them inside one dashboard. Based on these sources, organizations need key performance indicators for operational and functional levels metrics. And the end goal is to develop a custom reporting dashboard that will show all of the metrics from the all end. And now, what is exist inside the Azure that simplify the hybrid infrastructure management? Maybe it's nothing there. My answer is no. Inside the Azure, it exists an Azure Arc. What is it? Azure Arc is a service that provides a set of technologies for organizations that want to simplify their complex and distributed environments. Azure Arc provides a centralized, unified, and self-service approach to managing Windows Server, Linux servers, Kubernetes clusters. You can also use Azure Arc to introduce Azure Data Services to hybrid environment. Azure Arc enables you to extend Azure management capabilities to hybrid environments, including on-premise data centers and third-party cloud providers. You can use Azure Arc to manage and configure your Windows and Linux machines in Kubernetes clusters that are hosted outside of Azure. By using Azure Arc, you can manage your IT resources wherever they are hosted, using the same Azure management tools and practice you use to manage Azure hosted resources. This means you can manage resources with tools that you are familiar with, as for example, Azure Resource Manager, Azure Cloud Shell, Azure Portal, Azure Policy, if you want to implement some kind of the new security or best security practices inside your environment. And also, Azure Policies, it's manage your resources regardless where it is located. Azure Arc also extends adoptions of cloud practice such as DevOps and Azure Security across the on-premise, multiple cloud, and edge environment. In addition to extend the control plane for management, Azure Arc enables organizations to run Azure Data Service anywhere. Just to summarize, Azure Arc is a bridge that extends the Azure platform to help you build applications and services with the flexibility to run across the data centers at the edge and multi-cloud environments, develop cloud-native applications with a consistent development, operations, and security models. Azure Arc runs on both new and existing hardware, virtualization, and Kubernetes platform, IoT devices, and also any kind of integrated systems. Today, companies struggle to control and govern increasingly complex environments that extend across data centers, multiple clouds, and edge. Each environment and cloud poses its own set of the management tools, and new DevOps and IT operational models can be hard to implement across resources. Azure Arc simplifies governance and management by delivering a consistent multi-cloud and on-premises management platform. Azure Arc provides a centralized, unified way to, first, manage your entire environment together by projecting your existing non-Azure and or on-premise resources into Azure Resource Manager. Second, manage virtual machines, Kubernetes clusters, and databases as if they are running in Azure. Third, use familiar Azure services and management capabilities regardless of where they live. What it means? It means that you are not care about where does it placed. Fourth, continue using traditional IT operations while introducing DevOps practice to support new cloud-native patterns in your environment. Fifth, configure custom locations as an abstractions layer on top of Azure Arc-enabled Kubernetes cluster and extensions. Currently, Azure Arc allows you to manage the following resource types hosted outside of the Azure. It's servers. You can manage Windows, Linux, physical servers, and virtual machines hosted outside the Azure. Kubernetes clusters. Attach and configure Kubernetes cluster running anywhere with multiple support distributions. Azure Data Services. Run Azure Data Services on premises, at the edge, and in public clouds using Kubernetes and the infrastructure you choose. It uses SQL managed instances, PostgreSQL server, but PostgreSQL right now it's in preview, but all of them are currently available. SQL Server. You can extend Azure services to SQL Server instances that hosted outside the Azure. Also, you can setup, and you can use the virtual machines, but these features is in preview. Let me notice that preview features, it's not in GA, it's grant availability, but it's currently tested and supported. So you can provision, resize, delete, and manage virtual machines based on the VMware vSphere and Azure Stack HCI, and enable VM self-service through the role-based access. By the way, with Azure Arc enabled Azure HCI, do you know what HCI it means? HCI is an abbreviation of the hyper-converged infrastructure. You can perform various operations from the Azure portal with the HCI stack. I mean, you can perform such operations as create VM, stop, start, restart virtual machine, control access, and for example, and add Azure tags. So why it's so important? Because in this case, you can create a simple query from your Azure portal, get the results, and store these results as, for example, in some kind of Excel files, and provide it as an output of your infrastructure, of your cost of your infrastructure, of your currently resources inside them. What else you can do? You can add, remove virtual disk and network interfaces. You can update memory and virtual CPU of your VMs. By using Azure Portal, you get the same consistent experience when provisioned and managing on-premises VMs or cloud VMs. You can access your VMs only, not the host fabric enabling role-based access and source service. By the way, let me say a few words about the HCI and HCI stacks. At the end of May this year, it was announced an Azure HCI stack for the single nodes. What it means, it's decrease the number of infrastructures that you need inside your HCI, because previously it was multi-node setup. Right now it's single node setup. And oftenly I receiving the questions, why it's so important to use an HCI, and what is the best way to use the Azure HCI stack? Let me answer from the Azure way. So, what is the way to use the Azure Stack HCI for? The best virtualization and host modernize your infrastructure is for existing workloads in your core data centers or emerging requirements for branch, office, and edge locations. Second, it's easy extensibility to cloud with a regular stream of innovations from the Azure subscription and a consistent set of tools and experiences. Also, you will receive all of the benefits from the hyper-converged infrastructure, simply a more consolidated data center architecture with high-speed storage and also network. And right now, let's talk about Azure Arc key features and benefits. So, it's a lot of them. Let's discuss several parts. Let's talk about it. So, implement consistent inventory management, governance, and security for servers across your environment. It's one of the benefits, it's one of the biggest benefits that I ever have. Also, you can configure your Azure VM extensions to use Azure Management Services to monitor, secure, and update your service. You can manage and govern Kubernetes cluster at scale. One of the features that I already shows you inside the image stage, it's a use GitOps to deploy configuration across one or more clusters from Git repositories. You can create a zero-touch compliance and configuration for Kubernetes cluster using the Azure Policies. You can run Azure data services on any Kubernetes environment as it runs inside the Azure, especially if you're talking about the Azure SQL managed instances or Azure databases for PostgreSQL server. One more time, I need to notice that right now, the PostgreSQL feature is inside the preview, but I tested them and it's running well. Which benefits it will provide for you? It will provide you such benefits for the databases as updates. So you can use any kind of the security inside your databases and also the monitoring. You can get from the databases long-running queries, for example. You can get the workloads from your databases, and you can read them and you can store them inside the incisors, for example, or log monitor, and this information will be observable for you. Also, inside these main benefits, you can use an elastic scale, and you can apply updates without any application downtime, even without if your application is continuously connected to these databases, any kind of the downtime will be exist. If it's necessary, I can run the workshop for you, and you will see it. Also, you can create a custom location on top of your Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes cluster, using them as an attached location for deploying your Azure services instances. You can deploy your Azure Service Cluster extensions to your Azure Arc enabled data services, app services inside the Azure Arc. By the app services, I mean that you can deploy any kind of the web functions, logics app, etc. Even you can run an event grid inside the Kubernetes. Also, additional benefits, you can perform a virtual machine's life cycle and management operations for VMware WebSphere and Azure Stack HCI environment. One more time, I need to notice that VMware WebSphere and Azure Stack HCI right now support Azure Stack HCI is supported in full scope of its in full scope, but VMware WebSphere are some limitations, but you can read them inside the official documentation. Also, a unified experience viewing your Azure Arc enabled resources, whether you are using the Azure Portal, Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, or any kind of the REST API, you can get the full scope of your resources. You can create some kind of the wrappers, you can store these wrappers, you can transfer these wrappers to the database, you can understand which environment you have, you can understand which infrastructure you are using, you can understand which how many resources you are using. So it's very important tool sets for you just to understand the financial operations and to understand the and as you understood, Azure Arc is a really powerful tool. And if you understood that it's a really powerful tool, let's talk about the pricing model. Main pricing model you can find going by a link at this slide. But let me answer on the several most common questions about the pricing. First one, it's the questions, it's about the Azure Policy. So is Azure Policy charged for resources outside the Azure? And my answer is yes. Azure Policy has different capabilities. Azure Policy guest configurations is charged in a per server basis. It costs like $6 per month on a server outside of Azure connected through the Azure Arc. You can use any number of the policies on that server. And any other type of Azure policy that does not rely on guest configuration is offered on no additional costs. It's including the virtual machine extensions to enable services like an Azure Monitor or Azure Security Center. It can be auto tagging, something like this. So you will pay only the $6 per month of the server outside the Azure. And also you will pay only for the policies that's connected to the guest configurations inside this server. Next one, and it's a really good one, notice from the pricing model, it's about the Kubernetes enabled configurations. So what's about the Kubernetes configuration? Kubernetes configurations deliver configuration management and application deployment using the GitOps. With this capability, cluster admins can declare the cluster configurations and applications in Git. So the development team can then use these pull requests and the tools that they are familiar, like DevOps pipelines, Git, Kubernetes manifest, Helm charts, to easily deploy application onto Azure Arc, enable Kubernetes cluster, and make updates in production. The GitOps agent listens to change and facilitate automated rollbacks. If these changes result in system divergence from the source of trust. Billing is based on the numbers of vCPU per hour in the cluster, and it's changed monthly. Clusters can function without a constant connection to the Azure, but when disconnection, each cluster charge will be determined based on the last known numbers of the vCPU that were registered with Azure Arc. If your cluster will be disconnected from Azure and you don't want to be charged for a Kubernetes configuration, you can delay these configurations. The vCPU count is updated every 5 minutes when it's connected, and as I remember, the first 6 vCPUs is included at no cost. At all, it will cost for you like first 6 vCPUs free. Then $2 per vCPU per month, but it has several notices, and I can suggest you to contact the official documentation about this. In my real life example, it was configurations costs like near the 10 USD per month. If you're talking about the Azure Arc enabled service, from Azure Arc enabled service, you need to know that inside the pricing model, Azure Update Management is offered for service outside of Azure at no additional costs. Also, I want to notice that Azure Arc resources managed by guest configurations are excluded from billing. As an example of Azure Automation, so inside the Azure Automation, guest configurations assignments are not built if the machines is already managed by the state configuration or change tracking features offered by the Azure Automation. Okay, we just now talked about the Azure Arc, about this pricing model, but let's talk about the main Azure Arc benefits. What you can do with the Azure Arc enabled service. The first step for an administrator is to connect their service to Azure Arc. This process is called onboarding. To onboard a server, you must install the Azure Connected Machine Agent. The installation connects your machine to Azure Arc enabled service. The Azure Connected Machine Agent currently supports the following version of the Windows and Linux operating systems. As I remember, it's Windows Server 2008 R2, Service Pack 1, 2012, 2016, 2012, it's R2 also, 2019 to 2022. Also, it includes server core installations. It supports Windows IoT Enterprise. It supports an Azure Stack HCI. It supports an Ubuntu version 16.04, 18.04. 20.04 LTS. It also supports CentOS Linux 7 and 8, supports SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 12 and 15. It supports Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 and 8. Also it supports Amazon Linux, Oracle Linux, Amazon Linux, as I remember, it's Amazon Linux version 2. And also it supports Oracle Linux 7 and 8. The Azure Connected Machine agent sends a heartbeat message to the Azure Arc service every 5 minutes. If the Azure Arc service stops receiving the heartbeat message from the connected machine, it's considered that this machine is to be offline. The machine then it's marked inside the Azure Arc as a disconnected until heartbeat resume, at which time the machine is marked or connected when it restores the connection. When you onboard a server, it becomes a connected machine, and it's represented by corresponding Azure resources. That resources has a unique resource ID property. It belongs to a resource group inside a subscription, and it can benefit. As about the benefits that it will receive, so it will receive the Azure management features. So it's such features as an Azure Policy, Azure tags. After you connect your machine to Azure Arc enabled service, you can perform the following configuration management tasks. So you can assign the Azure Policy guest configuration using the same process as when you assign the process to the same Azure VMs. You can monitor your connected machines. You can monitor the guest operation system, and you can monitor the performance inside the guest operation system of your connected machines. You can use Azure Monitor for VMs. You can discover the application components. You monitor different kinds of the application process, dependencies of the process, dependencies of the installation, etc. You can also it supports the resource context log access and log data that is correct, and when it's connected when this Linux agent connected to the Azure Arc, this machine agent sent and logs to the Azure Arc. This log stored inside the log analytics workspace, so it will be a big benefit that it's stored inside the one place. So you can simplify the deployment of the Azure other Azure services. For example, you can implement an Azure Automation state configurations. It's like some similar to the Ansible, and you can use the Azure Monitor log analytics workspace. You can include different script extensions. You can perform the post-deployment configurations. You can install different kinds of the software. So main benefits from the connection of Azure Arc enabled service, that this service is will be placed inside one place. You can create a continuous integration. You can create a continuous configuration management of this server. You can get the logs and you can monitor them. So it's a big benefit for the Azure Arc enabled service. Okay, and next benefit is Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes. What is Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes? Using the Azure Arc, you can connect Kubernetes cluster located anywhere to Azure. So as for example, you are using your Kubernetes cluster on premises, you can connect them to the Azure and get the same experience as you get with the Azure Arc enabled AKS cluster. You can then manage this connected cluster in a consistent way, just as you would in Azure. Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes yet lets you control the cluster configuration and workload at scale using the Git repository as a source of trust, providing the extensive management capabilities of the Azure, such as inventory, monitoring, policy, compliance, security, user access, and more. So when you implement Azure Arc, you can then start to use many Azure services to manage your cluster. Clusters. This includes someone has, so for example, you can manage your cluster using the Azure Portal. You can use the Azure Resource Graph. You can use the Azure Policy. You can use the Azure Monitor. Each Kubernetes cluster you enable with Azure Arc is assigned on Azure Resource Manager ID. So it has a managed identity. It's located in an Azure Resource Group and subscription. It's a P inside the Azure Portal. It's it can be treated like other Azure resources. For example, it can be tagged for inventory management. At minimum, you can implement Azure Arc in your Kubernetes cluster to view the inventory of your complete Kubernetes estate, and then group and tag the clusters for finer-grained inventory management. And also, additionally, you can use the GitOps-based management, GitOps-based configuration management to deploy application and configure the cluster. You can use the Azure Policy for the Kubernetes to enforce runtime policies on your Kubernetes cluster, and you can use the Azure Monitor for containers to consistently. And at the end, how we can use the Azure Policies inside the Azure Arc. So Azure Policy is a service that can help organizations manage and evaluate compliance for their Azure environment's organizational standards. Azure Policy uses declarative rules based on properties of target Azure resource types. These rules form policy definitions which administrators can apply through policy assignment to a resources group or subscriptions. Assign policies with Azure Arc. To manage and assign Azure Arc policies for a computer, browse to the Azure Arc in the Azure portal. In the returned list of the managed service, select appropriate server and then assign a policy to it. You'll need to configure the following things. First of all, you need to configure the policy scope as well as any exclusion from the policy scopes. Also, you will need to configure a policy definition, you will need to configure an assignment name, description, and policy enforcement. After this, you can save this policy, and this policy will be available on the next step. How you can use the Azure Monitor? You can use the Azure Monitor to optimize the administration of your existing deployments and to forecast capacity requirements for the future deployments. Monitor provides three main capabilities. It's monitor and metrics visualization, query and analyzing logs, alerting and remediation. Monitor supports collecting and monitoring metrics, activity, and diagnostics logs and events from a wide range of the Azure services and computers, both on premises, data centers, and with other cloud providers. As for example, you can configure Azure Monitor for any kind of your services that's placed inside your Azure clouds, and it will transfer the logs. It will transfer your application logs. It will transfer your operation systems metrics and logs inside your Azure Log Monitoring. And based on these logs, you can create different actions and different notifications. This notification will be sent to you, or it can set up or restart any kind of the services applications inside the remote server. Also, a monitor present as a summary of the triggered alerts, logs, metrics, and application-related telemetry originals from application inside. You can also access this data using by the Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, REST API, Microsoft.NET SDK. So you can create any kind of the actions that you will do based on your log alerts. One additional and wonderful thing that is present inside the Azure Arc is a Microsoft Defender with the Sentinel that can provide a high security level for your application and for your infrastructure inside your environment. Thank you. Thank you that you can listen all of these features from Azure Arc. And also, if you have any questions, please contact me. I'm open to answer for all of them.